Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 24 playthrough of the Buffalo Wings. And we are about to begin the free agency period for the 2045 to 2046 offseason. Our Buffalo Wings are doing this from a position of strength. We are now back-to-back World Series champions, and we are seriously thinking about going for a three-peat. And appreciate those of you who took some time as members of our worldwide scouting department to give us your opinions on how we should proceed with free agent Harlan Campeau at the end of our last episode and in the comment section to that episode. And it might be a bit of confirmation bias since I've been touting Campeau as one of the top pitchers in the game for many years. But I do appreciate those of you who shared your thoughts, and I do think that Campeau, with his excellent stuff, well above average movement and above average control, is a great candidate for us to think about. He is a very accomplished pitcher. You can see a Cy Young Award 3 years ago, a perennial all-star, and over the course of his career at the major league level, he's put up a 120 ERA plus and a 73 FIP minus, 66.8 WAR for his career. He will be a huge addition to our pitching staff next season if we're able to get him and really give us a top four that I think should rival anyone in baseball. And as I noted at the end of the last episode when I asked the question, Campeau was looking for about $19 million on a one-year deal. Fits perfectly with the amount of money we had without making a long-term commitment, so it was a pretty obvious addition to me, and it seems like our worldwide scouts felt the same way. Did just negotiate a potential contract with Campeau, though, and I got a little bit more creative. It's a 3-year deal, but there's team options for both the second and third years. $15 million the first year, $16 the second, and $17 the third. So it gives us him next year at a lower price target than he was supposedly looking for if he signs it. And it also does give us the optionality if we end up winning another championship and our budget doesn't get cut back, and maybe we can fit him under our salary restrictions next year, gives us the opportunity to potentially bring him back for another couple seasons, potentially trade him away if he's got some trade value, but also to get out of the contract if it doesn't work out the way that we hope. So hopefully that will work out well. And as you know, at the end of the last episode, we also made a long-term offer to our current ace, Jim Lance, which will hopefully keep him in Buffalo for the main productive years of the remainder of his career. So hopefully we'll get successful results from the offers to Campeau and Lance over the next few weeks. At the start of the episode, did want to check in on someone who Stanley Rosella has been a bit obsessed with, and apparently my dog is obsessed with someone doing something they should not be doing outside in our neighborhood. But a couple of off seasons ago, when we made the decision to bring on the young shortstop prospect Josh Fuchs, we also did potentially have an opportunity to bring on the somewhat more experienced shortstop Brendan Robards, and Stanley Rosella still thinks we probably should have done this. We've hedged ourselves on Fuchs a bit with the recent trade for Weisenbach. Feel like we've got two pretty solid young shortstops. Looking at Robards, he's continued to be an excellent player. He's now won 4 consecutive Gold Gloves at shortstop, and obviously, looking at those ratings, is an exceptional defensive player. His bat is pretty much fully developed at this point, and he's clearly a below-average offensive player, well below average with a 58 WRC plus a year ago. He's put up 1.5 and 1.6 WARs each of the last 2 seasons. Over the course of his career, 69 WRC plus player, so not a very productive offensive player at all. But with that glove, still a player who is far above replacement level and the premier defensive shortstop in the National League at this point. Also a switch hitter, which is pretty interesting. So he has done well, but I am not willing to realize a loss on my decision quite yet. I'll certainly acknowledge that the defensive ratings favor Robards a little bit. Right now, he's got a little bit better range, a little bit better turn double play rating, a perfect error rating, 10 points higher than what Fuchs has, and they both have well above average arms. So Robards, as we've talked about, is a perennial Gold Glove winner, guy who can probably win 10 Gold Gloves over the course of his career at shortstop. Fuchs, who really is a shortstop, although we've been playing him at second base more recently, just to diversify his position capabilities, is more a guy who will be a well above average defensive shortstop through the course of his career and can probably pick up 2 or 3 Gold Gloves perhaps over the course of his career. So certainly would agree that Robards is better defensively. Turning, however, to their offensive capabilities, I'm still holding out hope that Fuchs, who is more than 4 years younger than Robards, can develop into a more productive offensive player. Right now, he's certainly not, with contact and avoid strikeout ratings that are both worse than where Robards is. But when you look at where we think Fuchs could develop, his gap power could be better, his home run power could be much better, his eye could be materially better. The only thing we're pretty confident on is that Fuchs is going to strike out more than Robards, but I think the potential for him to draw significantly more walks and hit significantly more home runs could ultimately result in him being closer to a league average offensive player than Robards is. Now, admittedly, Fuchs did not do much to improve his hitting ratings this past season, which was definitely disappointing, but I am still, as I noted, not willing to give up on Fuchs, and we are hedging a bit with bringing on Weisenbach, who as a right-handed hitter could work very well in a platoon with Fuchs down the line. Still hope that one of those players, either Fuchs or Weisenbach, clearly develops into a better all-around player than Robards. But if they don't, I think we can put a pretty reasonable facsimile of him together in a platoon situation where even if there isn't much more offensive development from Fuchs and Weisenbach, we can probably generate more offense than Robards is as a switch hitter, while still having very capable defense, although probably not quite Robards level defense. So wanted to give an update on that, share my latest thoughts there. And now it is time to get moving on through the free agency period and see if we can land a couple of big contracts with Lance and Campeau. And one piece of good news here at the end of November, Jim Lance has signed that massive free agent extension with us. He's going to make over $19 million next year in his last arbitration eligible season. And you can see we signed him to an 8-year contract. He does have the ability to opt out after 5 years, but if he opts in, then that gives us team options for the 7th and 8th season. So some protection for both sides in this deal, and will be really nice to have the guy who probably should have won the National League Cy Young Award this year back in the rotation through hopefully what will be his peak years. And our rental catcher from the end of last season, Luis Ortega, has moved on. Once again, our fans showing they are not necessarily the most sophisticated in the world. He was clearly a rental when we brought him on board. We never made any attempts to bring him back. But our fans are still shocked that he was not kept. He ended up going back to his previous team, the Philadelphia Phillies. So it really was a true rental for us. The Phillies signed him to a 4-year, $112.5 million deal that will take him through his mid and into his late 30s. So thanks, Ortega, for helping us win a World Series last year. Taking a look at Our wings at this point, even with that departure, fan interest still at over 100 or above. So hopefully it won't have too much of an impact on our attendance and finances going forward. And as the winter meetings start, the Phillies, who had a tough year last year with another piece of good news after re-signing the best hitting catcher in baseball, they jumped over their state rivals, the Pittsburgh Pirates, to move into the #1 position for the upcoming 2046 draft. And as those winter meetings begin, still waiting to hear back officially from Campo. The only feedback we've got is that he favors the offer, but still not signed yet. Do have some options with Juan Estrada. We could certainly bring back him and his two-way capabilities and his captain personality, or attempt to do that. He is looking for a ton of money at this point, so I think he's probably going to linger on the market for a while. $29 million from a 38-year-old who is still a good pitcher, but not a great pitcher. And offensively, I think you could still describe the same way: a good offensive player, but not a great offensive player at this point. Don't know that anyone's going to be willing to give him close to $30 million a year right away. I wonder how many years he's looking for. Only 2 years, so he's being somewhat reasonable given that he's already 38 and he's going to be turning 39 early in the season. But still think that's a lot of money for what Juan Estrada is at this point. And our old buddy Juan Estrada did get the 2-year deal he was looking for. Only $46 million total from the Las Vegas A's, so $23 million a year, so not quite the money that he was looking for. At this point, Campo still favors our offer. We knew he was going to be hard to sign. It looks like his single-year demand has come down a bit to $17.7 million. Don't know if that works in our favor for the $15 million we've offered him, and with the team option for next year, there's going to be a buyout that's going to give him more than $1.5 million other dollars. So he's kind of guaranteeing himself at least $16.5 million plus if he signs with us. I think he still may be looking for and hoping for just a pure 1-year deal. If that's really what he wants, hopefully he'll give us that feedback before just going off and signing that deal with somebody else. And with the Rule 5 draft coming up in just a few days, we've been re-scouting all 100 of the players in our organization who are eligible for the Rule 5 draft, and we've got the ability to put several on the team. The one obvious add is Danny Black. We've talked about him a lot. He is the number 14 prospect in baseball, first-round pick of ours in 2041, combined to have a excellent season between AA Utica and AAA Albany a year ago. And if we sign Campo, we vision Black slotting in as our 4th starter next year, with Lance number 1, probably Campo number 2, our veteran Alexis Barajas number 3, and then the youngster Danny Black is our number 4 starter. So Black certainly will be going on to the 40-man roster. As I mentioned, we've got updated scouting reports on everybody over the last couple weeks. Clearly, Alfaro, Ryle, and Wisniewski are the guys that we think have the highest potential. Chad Aguirre is a pitcher with some capability too, and then Jesus Aguilar is really interesting defensively, pretty versatile. Just don't know if the bat at a player who's almost 24 years old is worth protecting at this point. But we've got some decisions to make and would like to ensure that hopefully we have at least one slot available for players in the Rule 5 in terms of us adding some talent to our team. Don't have any huge holes, particularly if we sign Campo. And if we sign Campo, that'll, of course, take up another roster spot. But always on the lookout for someone who may slip through the cracks and end up in the Rule 5 draft. And in addition to Black, we added a couple more players on to the 40-man roster. Still thinking about maybe adding one more player or two. We added John Wisniewski, who was our first-round pick, or actually more accurately, another first-round pick of ours in 2041. Left-handed reliever is not a potentially world-changing reliever that he thought he was going to be when we picked him up. He is a guy whose potential is much less than we thought it could be when we were drafting him, but still think he could be a pretty useful left-handed arm out of the bullpen. And then we also added Yusuke Woodruff, eighth round pick from that same draft in 2041, 23 years old now. He split last year between AA and AAA and was a starting catcher for us at both levels, combined for 44 homers and over 100 ribbies. He's got some above average home run power. He's only average defensively as a catcher, which those of you who have watched me over the years know is not necessarily exactly what I'm looking for. But with the departure of Ortega, we were in a situation where we had only two catchers, Ramirez and the newly acquired Banks, on our 40-man roster, and like to ensure that we've got at least three catchers on the 40-man just in case we have some injuries. Don't know that Woodruff is our long-term solution as a backup, but he kind of could be. As I said, not the defensive ability that I'd love, but based on the way he's produced in the minor leagues, he could be one of those players who produces a bit better than his ratings indicate that he should. And if he's a guy who can consistently hit some home runs at the major league level, an average defensive catcher with a bit of pop in his bat is not necessarily the worst thing in the world to have as a backup catcher. And I might as well go through the guys that I haven't added to the Rule 5 yet to kind of let you know what I'm thinking there. Andres Alfaro, first baseman. He's got speed. He can play a lot of positions, although he can't really play them well. But with no home run power, no ability to draw walks, if somebody wants to guarantee him a spot on the major league roster next year with a huge jump from Class A ball, good luck to you. Ben Ryle, I like a little bit more. He's made it all the way to AA. Like his work ethic, but that 35 control is going to mean he's a pitcher I'm never going to use in the majors. If someone wants to get the left-hander an opportunity to play in the majors, good luck to him. Jesus Aguilar, I'm a little more torn about. I like his 65 infield range and error ratings, like his defensive versatility. The bat is a below-average major league bat, but it's not completely inept. Doesn't have much speed. Don't love the low adaptability and work ethic. I think some of the personality traits are kind of why I'm leaning towards not putting him on the 40-man. He's also almost 25 years old, so it kind of is what it is as far as his abilities, especially with that low adaptability and work ethic. Probably unlikely to reach the little bit of additional potential that we think he has. Won't love it if I lose him, but with the fact that we have Fuchs and Weisenbach in the organization already, and then right now we're envisioning Juan Palomo, who's got similar infield range and a better bat as our utility infielder next year. I don't know that we need to bring Aguilar onto the 40-man, but I'm a little more torn on him. Chad Aguirre, third-round pick from 2040. Worry a little bit about his control, but also don't love some of the personality traits. He did make it up to AA this past, or to AAA this past year, and he was good in high A, AA, and AAA ball. A little torn on him. He's a lefty who could help us, and I feel a little better about him than I do about Ryle, just because I think that Aguilar's control could be good enough. One other guy that I'm thinking about, it's funny, I thought about Mitch Houlihan, who you may remember is in our farm system, but felt like, given that he's wrecked physically, given that he's going to be 33 soon, as much as I love his defense, if someone wants to guarantee him a major league spot next year, they can. I'd rather go with the youngster Woodruff onto the 40-man roster. Dory Redding is the other guy that I'm thinking about. Seventh round pick from 2040, but he does have that captain personality, capable of playing competent to respectable defense around the infield. Not a great bat. Put up an 87 WRC plus in AA and a 97 WRC plus in AAA last year. In theory, I think I'd love to have a guy like Redding or perhaps a guy like Aguiar still in the organization. But I don't really know that I love either of them enough to do it. And I do think that I am going to put Chad Aguirre onto the 40-man. So that puts us at 38. Gives us room to potentially add one more Rule 5 eligible player if we want to go into the draft, being able to add one player to our team, but also need to keep in mind that we're still hoping to sign Harlan Campeau, which would be a 39th roster spot, in which case we can't really add any more if we want the ability to pick someone in the Rule 5. But we'll know in the next few days whether we've signed Campeau before the Rule 5 or not. And we made it to the Rule 5. We still have not heard back from Campeau. Supposedly he still favors our offer, but not a ton of feedback coming our way. Thinking perhaps Scott Boras III is perhaps his agent, because he has not been extremely communicative with us, and he's lingering on the market at this point compared to some of the other top free agents that were available this offseason. Not going to add any other Rule 5 players. You know, we talked about Aguiar, we talked about Dory Redding. I like that both. I think it's unlikely we're going to lose both of them. And even if we did lose both of them, I think it's unlikely that they're going to stay on the 26-man roster of another team throughout the season. So willing to take the risk that we miss out on them now, with the expectation, or perhaps not expectation, but with the hope, and I think a realistic hope that it seems like we get back a fair number of the players that we lose in the Rule 5 draft over the years. I'd probably, if I had to guesstimate, I'd probably guess that at least 50% of them come back to us within the first 3 or 4 months of that next season, when teams make some moves and need a roster spot, or they figure out that that player just isn't quite as good or isn't quite the perfect fit that they had hoped. So if we lose some talent, that's what happens when you've got a very highly regarded farm system. And not surprisingly, before we've even picked, a couple of the guys that we were talking about were selected. Mitch Houlihan, we were willing to move on from him. He was pretty unhappy being stuck in AAA, wrecked physically in his 30s, not much of a hitter now. And then we did lose Jesus Aguiar to the Royals organization. We'll see if they can keep him on the major league team or send him back. As I said, I like his glove, and I think he could have been an interesting utility infielder, but I like Palomo better because Palomo's got a better bat, and Palomo's also got some better personality traits. I just don't think Aguiar, with that low work ethic and adaptability, is really going to get any better than we think he is today. With that poor speed, not a great bunter, not a great base runner. He's certainly a useful glove as a utility infielder, but I just don't know how much else he's really going to bring at the major league level. And we are going to take a flyer on one player in the draft, and oftentimes we go for younger players, but we're going to go for a veteran now. Lazaro Savonarola, may remember him. I can't remember whether it was in the draft or as an international amateur free agent. Looking at his nationality, I'm guessing it was that we looked him at as an international amateur free agent many years ago. But he's making $1.6 million, right-handed reliever, throws in the mid to high 90s, plus stuff, plus movement, a bit above average in terms of his control. Has been average in terms of his ERA plus, but well above average in terms of his FIP minus over the course of his major league career. He's an Iron Man. He's a real good influence in the clubhouse. I don't know that he makes our 26-man roster because our pitching is so deep. But if we have some injuries, or if he just blows us away when we get him into our camp, I think he's a guy who is worth at least bringing in and having in spring training this upcoming season. And we're going to actually make another pick right now, which will fill up our 40-man roster, which is going to necessitate likely sending one of these players back very quickly if and when we do sign Campo. But Alejandro Medina is a guy, a catcher that I also looked at in the first round. 23 years old, looks like he could have a competent major league bat, and he's well above average in terms of his catcher ability. He made a huge jump from high A ball to Triple A last year, but certainly more than held his own at Triple A in a small sample size. Don't love that he's fragile in terms of his injury proneness. I don't know that there's any chance that he actually makes our team with Ramirez and Banks at catcher. But if we can keep him on the 40-man until then, he's good insurance. And similar to Savonarola, and particularly in the case of Medina, who's only 23 years old, maybe he gets into camp and blows us away, and we decide, hey, we really want this guy on the team instead of Ramirez or Banks, and we make a move to open up a roster spot for him. So we're going to go ahead and draft Medina, put him on the 40 roster for the time being. Again, that puts us at 40 men on the 40-man roster. So if and when Campo signs, we're going to have a decision to make with most likely one of the players that we protected ahead of the Rule 5 draft or one of the guys that we just picked up in the Rule 5 draft. But if things don't work out with Campo, at least we've given ourselves an out with Savonarola, and we've added another potentially interesting catcher into our organization, even if it's only for a few months. And as it turned out, Houlihan and Aguiar were the only players that we lost, so we'll see if we end up getting either of them back next year. I tend to think that Houlihan we probably won't see again. I think it's conceivable that the Royals might move on from Aguiar, though. And good news here, a couple of days after Christmas, 2045. Hopefully I'll be around to see a couple days after Christmas in 2045. Harlan Campo is signed, so we are going to need to make a move to the 40-man to get him onto the team. But it worked out well for us. Kind of described the contract to you at the beginning of the episode, but guaranteed $15 million next year. Team options for the 2 years after that. Does have some buyouts that will guarantee him a little more money. And he was looking for a bonus with innings pitched. We bumped it from 160 to 180, but still included that, which helped us get the deal done. So really liking what we think our pitching staff is going to look like next year with the addition of Campo. Our wings are all in on a three-peat. Looking at our financial situation here, still have some money to use. Probably will not be too active the rest of the off season in terms of the free agent market, just because we don't have room on the 40-man roster. So no point in going after a major league player unless that player is clearly an upgrade to what we have. And it is conceivable in 2 or 3 months there might be someone lingering on the market that fits the bill there. But right now tend to think pretty content with what we have, but certainly the addition of a perennial all-star starter should boost our chances to achieve a three-peat next season. And we're going to actually keep all of the Rule 5 players the 2 Rule 5 players that we picked, as well as the 4 players we added to our roster from our minor league system before the Rule 5 draft. We are going to keep all of them around at this point. There's some veterans that we don't necessarily love, who don't have much trade value because we've been trying to move on from them. Aiden LeBlanc, a reliever, and then Mike Frank, the veteran utility man, are the 2 guys we're thinking about pulling off of the 20 or the 40-man roster. Although I don't see Frank likely being our second utility infielder. Right now, I think Palomo or perhaps even Weisenbach is more likely in that spot. I can't see a scenario with an injury or two where we might want Frank around. Adam LeBlanc, I just don't see any role for him. So we are going to go ahead and waive and DFA Mr. LeBlanc. And he is a guy that I have looked to trade in all of those trades that we were doing over the last few episodes. And he really had very limited value. No one really cared to add him with a guaranteed major league contract to their team. So I don't know whether anyone will pick him up or not, but that allows us to put Campo onto the 40-man and the 26-man. And now when we start thinking about what this team is going to look like next year as far as our pitching staff, still don't technically have Danny Black on the 26-man roster, although my expectation is that he will be on it when we break from spring training. But Jim Lance, the recently re-signed ace, will be back as our number one. Campo, hopefully healthy after an injury-plagued 2045. He is still normal as far as his injury proneness. Slots in at the age of 35 at number 2. Alexis Barajas, the 37-year-old veteran, he was our ace for many years. He's been a member of all 5 of our World Series championship teams, and with the retirement of Deshaun Seifu this past offseason, he's the only guy who's got a chance to be a member of more than 5 championship teams with the Buffalo Wings organization. So he's going to slide back down to number 3. Likely going to have Danny Black, who we talked about earlier in this episode, in that 4-hole. And then Jim Coles, the rookie from last year, who was 15-6, has that captain personality, which we need a bit at this point with Seifu gone. So we're going to keep him in the rotation next year, most likely as our number 5 starter, which is going to result in a ton of depth and options for the bullpen. McClintock's our closer, Auclair's our stopper, but we've got the likes of Manelli, who was a 5th starter for us the last few years, and Ruckel is setup guys, Roberts, Palencia, Savonarola, who we picked up, the lefty Kevin Hale, and then Chris Lott, who has been an excellent starter for us coming off of a 17-11 year. Likely going to be working out of the bullpen next year. So feel like the pitching staff, which has been our strength for basically the last 15 seasons of this playthrough, could be as strong as it's ever been next year, which I'm really looking forward to seeing on the field. And fortunately, after the fans upset about Ortega moving on, the fan increase is amazing associated with Campo. But of course, all we can see is that we're still above 100 to some extent. And we've made it into January, the Hall of Fame voting this year. Always interesting to look at. Pierce George, who was a big-time starting pitcher for many years. You can see he ended up winning 4 Cy Young Awards, made it into the Hall his first year of eligibility, along with Ellie De La Cruz, who, other than that last year with Colorado, spent his entire career, and a very good career, with the Cincinnati Reds organization. Always interesting to see, though, some of the real-life guys. And it's a pretty impressive list of real players that we're still seeing at this point in 2046 who didn't end up making it. Fernando Tatis Jr., no. Bryce Harper dropped from the ballot. Francisco Lindor, no. Shohei Ohtani, no. Ronald Acuna Jr., no. And Bobby Witt Jr., Yordan Alvarez, Corbin Burns, all of them are no's. And then a few familiar names from our playthrough. Adley Rutschman dropped from the ballot. And also Marcelo Meyer, who was on our team many seasons ago in the early stages of this playthrough, also dropped from the ballot. And I think Bryce Miller was our closer at one point, yeah. He was our closer for an extended period of time, and it was a member of our first World Championship team in 2034. 230 saves over the course of his career. Did not get any votes, but he was still on a Hall of Fame ballot, which is pretty cool. And forgot to mention, not that it's a huge deal, but nobody picked up Aaron LeBlanc after we waived and DFA'd him. So he's still very angry, but he is still a member of our organization at this point, just not on the 40-man roster anymore. And we've made it to the start of the international free agent signing period, which means we're nearing the end of this episode. I think we accomplished our main goals. We got Campeau signed. We got Lance signed to that extension. Added a couple of interesting players in the Rule 5 draft. Still have some money to spend for one-year contracts now. Can't do any extensions at this point, with the fact that we do technically have a team option on Campeau that we talked about on the books, as well as some pretty big arbitration numbers for Ramiro Medina next year. So we're headed up in terms of our salary obligations the next couple of years, but we do have outs with team options on Harlan Campeau, team options on Alexis Barajas, and even the team option on McClintock that will kick in a year earlier than the team options on Velasco or Auclair. But we've got Lance, Reichert, Casares all signed for the long term, and that should give us a really good base to build upon. And thinking about building for the future is where we turn our attention now to take a look at the international amateur free agents. Not the most impressive class of pitchers. These were all actually 2.5 or 2-star pitchers when we started scouting, so the class does look a little better than it did a few months ago. Noe Santa looks like he could be a pretty interesting right-handed reliever. Durable, 17 years old, throws in the low to mid 90s already. Looks like that fastball sinker combination could be pretty interesting. Looking for a lot of money as a potential reliever at $2 million, so don't know that we'll end up going too hard for him, but he's certainly on the list. And then Alejandro Mancelli is another guy who is looking for over $2 million and is considered the top potential prospect in the game, but he is also purely a reliever. Nice fastball sinker combination if it completely develops, but don't put a lot of confidence in that changeup becoming much of anything for the 16-year-old. So my initial inclination is that both of these are more fallback options. Have a bit of a hard time believing I'm going to go for $2 million plus for someone who I'm almost certain is going to end up as a reliever. So this could be an opportunity for us to be a bit more active with some of the batters this year, and that's certainly where we've put our attention as far as scouting. We'll start from the bottom. Catcher prospect Alfredo Caballero. Good arm, good work ethic, competent defensively, durable. Think that the bat is not great, but could end up being useful as a backup catcher down the line. And then we'll check on all of the 3-star and above prospects. Jesus Maldonado is one who we didn't scout as aggressively. Pretty generic first base prospect, above average contact, a little bit above average home run power. Awful defensively, not a lot of speed, some positive personality traits, but some negative personality traits. With Maldonado looking for $1.5 million plus, just didn't feel like he was someone I wanted to spend a lot of time scouting. The other 3-star prospect is center fielder Edgar Acevedo. Probably more of a corner outfielder when all is said and done. Is durable and does look like he could have a useful left-handed bat. Not a big-time prospect, but also not looking for a ton of money. Certainly somebody we might look to layer in with a higher-end prospect if that's the direction we end up going. 3.5 star prospects out there. Right fielder Omero Parenticelli, dual Venezuelan Italian nationality. Another guy who looks like a corner outfield, durable, a plus left-handed bat. Not an incredible prospect, but someone who could likely help a team. David Magdaleno, a left fielder, starting to get into some people with some more interesting profiles here. Also durable, a lot of really positive personality traits. Not great defensively, but a pretty interesting bat with that 70 contact potential, plus home run power, and competent-ish as far as his gap power, his eye, and his avoid strikeouts. At 6'6", he also is probably a better first baseman defensively than he is as a defensive outfielder. I think he could be a pretty interesting first base prospect. So I think of the players we've talked about, probably like Magdaleno the most, looking for $2 million, but that's a direction to consider going. And then someone who's listed as a first baseman, Sergio Lara, 6 feet tall, not quite as good defensively as Magdaleno. Does have a little bit more home run power, also not a lot of speed. I think that I prefer Magdaleno over Lara. But then we get into the 3 top end of the market prospects as far as everyday players, at least in terms of where our scout sees their ceiling. Center fielder Jorge Ramos, pretty interesting batting profile, has enough speed to take some advantage of that gap power. Also durable, 60 outfield range, can play a number of positions in the outfield and could also play first base. So he's certainly an interesting prospect. I don't right now have a real strong opinion between Magdaleno and Ramos. Could just come down to money and ease of signing, and certainly Magdaleno looking for $1 million less, but supposedly league interest in Magdaleno is also higher. Right fielder Alfredo Ramirez, corner outfielder, first baseman, a lot of durable guys this year. Potentially good bat. That 65 home run power is certainly interesting. Not a lot of speed. Not the greatest personality, but certainly not the worst. Not looking for as much money, which works in his favor. And then the 5-star prospect is the left fielder Eddie Trujillo, another corner outfielder. He's got the home run power that jumps off the page with that 75 home run power potential. He's got a little more speed than several of these players that we've looked at, but plus contact, plus ability to draw walks with close to world-class home run power is certainly an interesting combination. Looking for $3.2 million, so more than anyone else. League interest in him is very high. I tend to think he's going to be one of these guys who goes for closer to the full $5.7 million, where of course at $4.75 million, don't know that I'm going to be making a bunch of trades to try to scrape up another $950,000 to $1 million to make the acquisition of Trujillo possible. So I think my first inclination is maybe a Jorge Ramos or maybe a David Magdaleno as a guy that we go after real hard from the start and find out whether we can sign one of those guys for $2.5 to $3.5 million before they go for more than we can possibly pay. And then depending on how much you pay for one of those, maybe you look to supplement with a Ramirez or an Acevedo, or perhaps if these pitchers that are looking for over $2 million but are really only relievers linger on the market for a while, maybe there's an opportunity to layer in one of them as well. But if you've got other thoughts on what we should do in international amateur free agency, or even players that you've seen on this list as far as their potential pitching skills or potential batting skills that you think merit perhaps more attention and discussion than we have given them, would love to hear that as well. But pretty pleased thus far with the way this postseason, or more accurately, this off-season is going. And we'll find out what we do in international amateur free agency in our next episode. Until then, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.